Hey, what's happening, everyone? Just going to run you through a bench training session and a deadlift training session from last week. These are both PR sessions for me and a variation of my competition movement. So this bench training session is the full session for the most part. It's going to show you all the exercises. Can't talk right now. It's going to show you all the exercises that I did in this training session. So I start off with my T1 movement. This is my competition movement, or a very close variation of. And the variation on this day was just no wrist wraps. So everything else was going to mimic as closely as I can to the competition movement down to the sets and reps. So what I was doing on this day, I wanted to work up to a very clean paused single of a competition type bench, no wrist wraps. And so I wanted to make that essentially the same quality that I would expect out of a fairly difficult first attempt. Maybe went a little bit heavier than I would have on a first attempt, but still I was trying to hold myself to that same kind of standard. So here I get to 335 pounds, still dialing it in. I've been hitting the uprights. So what I'm trying to accomplish here is getting a competition-like press with competition-like standards, all without wrist wraps. And that's the only degree of change in this very specific T1 movement of mine. So I started off with a T1 movement, worked up to a heavy single, and then to get some more volume in that T1 range, I introduced another training variable from doing that single. I went up to sets of 3 at 85% of that 345. So this is 295 pounds. I did 3 sets of 3 here. And the variety here is now I'm doing more repetitions. So this is kind of referencing a video that Wesley Smith posted with Super Training, and I'll put that in the description box. And it's very much in line with the GZCL method that I kind of introduced to the powerlifting community just a few years ago when I got into powerlifting. And the essence of that is you practice your competition movements, but you're also heavily relying upon assistance exercises to help build the movement patterns and the strengths that you have as a lifter. You're trying to build up those weaknesses. You're trying to correct movement patterns. You're trying to also stay healthy. And so that whole first section that you just saw was all the T1 movement that I was doing. It's very competition specific, and it's just really prepping me to handle heavy weights. Because if you want to lift heavy weights, then you kind of need to do that fairly regularly, at least in my belief. Now, the only caveat to that is obviously you want to have great movement patterns. You don't want to be grinding a whole lot. You don't want to have a whole lot of, extra stress in your life. If you can't recover from these weights, then they're too heavy. So even though they might not qualify as a T1 lift, let's just be honest here. If you can't put in the kind of recovery means necessary to train this way, then it's not going to be an optimal training method. I'm not going to bullshit you guys about that. It's not right for everyone, but it works for me because, hey, I have got myself dialed into this method of training, and the way in which I recover is now adapted to that. And so it works for me. And, it's been going pretty well. Hit a huge PR just yesterday in my bench, so very excited about that. You'll see that in my next training video. So wrapped up that bench session with some incline bench for the T2, 185 pounds for I think 5 or 6 sets of 5, and then did some strict press for some T3 and some triceps pushdowns for some T3, just to get some more shoulder and some more tricep development work. So that wrapped up the bench training session. And again, the variations, the degree of change increased as I went down that pyramid from T1 down to T2 and then down to T3. The further I got away from that T1, the less like the competition movement my sets, reps, and the actual movement itself looked like a competition movement, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the gist and the rundown of that. Let's talk about deadlifting now, you guys. So this is standing on one plate. I've been doing some 3-inch, some 5-inch deficit pulls, and that's the variation of competition movement I'm working with here. Week off the floor, so I'm doing some deficit deadlifts. Last week I got 525 with a 5-inch deficit, massive PR for me. The week before that, I think I got 525 with a 3-inch deficit. So I worked up to a high deficit with a pretty high amount of weight, but I knew I could pull more. And now I'm going back down in deficits. I'm going to try to increase the weight. So that was 545 there. Felt pretty clean, felt pretty smooth. This is 585, also known as 6 plates, still standing on that 145-pound plate there. I estimate that to be maybe an inch and a quarter. So let's see how this 585 goes. All right, so the 585 went up pretty smooth, definitely hard as shit. So I stopped there. Don't think I could have pulled 600. That would have been awesome. So here I just dropped back down, only using my fingers to grip this bar. I did a set of 3 with 405, and then I just called it with deadlifts for that day. I was just, that 585 just took way too much out of me. So then I did a bunch of back work, a bunch of bicep work in the form of rows, pull downs, pull ups, curls, all that sort of stuff. Just really wanting to get my back very, very strong. Had this been a typical deadlift day, I would have done a few more deadlifts, a few more sets, somewhere around 20 total repetitions, some more leg direct work, and then some back work. Hope that explains the GZCL method a little bit. Thanks for watching.